about getting into training. For part two, we are going to be talking about the nutrition aspect. So, in case you missed last week, if you're wondering why you should listen to us, well, we've got experience in a lot of different areas. Now, as far as the military first responder side of things go, I worked in 911 for 4 years. As far as the lifting goes, I've been lifting for 23 years. I've got a degree in biology. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach. I used to compete in powerlifting. Now I'm currently a coach for bodybuilding, powerlifting, general health, and everything. And I've spent a whole lot of time trying to learn how to make everything to do with fitness actually understandable, as opposed to being just inundated with tons of information that is conflicting or misinterpreted.
Awesome. And I'm Joe Fisher, Director of Operations at 98 Octane. I was in the Army for 9 years. I did a little bit of time over in Kuwait. We we uh, we started this journey of 98 Octane about a year and a half ago. John New wrote the book started writing about 5 years ago about making it simple for the stupid guys like myself. Just dumb guys that need simple instruction and an easy push forward. And that's what we're trying to provide here with 98 Octane. And having that veteran experience, understanding the struggles that go along with that lifestyle, always running, never sleeping. It's important. And I think that I can speak to that as I've been there and I've done that. I lost 40 pounds with 98 Octane. And I feel good, and I would love to share that with other people.
That's all we're trying to do is share what will be helpful. So when we're talking about nutrition, the basis for it is going to begin with just what simply makes up the largest portions of it. We're going to talk a little bit about the macronutrients to begin with. And the first thing that I want to bring up in that category is going to be protein. Protein is something that gets talked about all the time about, oh, yeah, it's important. Oh, you got to up your protein. But you got to make sure that you understand why. Because if you don't understand why, then how are you going to get the importance of it and then actually believe in what you're doing in order to do what you need to do? So, to start off that point, the first thing we need to recognize is that protein is a macronutrient that therefore gives you calories, but most importantly, it gives you the amino acids. The amino acids are what are going to basically form proteins. You eat protein to get the amino acids, to get that ingredient into your body so that your body can use that ingredient to make its own proteins that are specific to it and its functions. The single most obvious one that comes to mind is going to be muscles. Muscles are going to be made up of proteins, but there's so much more in your body that then is going to be comprised of proteins. If you want a fun example of that, lactase. The lactase enzyme that people have so that if they are lactose intolerant can then digest lactose, they need to have the lactase to break it down. That in itself is a protein. This is a fun little example. What's relevant for today is going to be how to figure out what kinds of protein you should be having and in what amounts. And in general, you have the categories of animal and plant. It's going to be the simplest way to look at it. If it is an animal source, then the amino acid profile of it is going to be more readily usable by a human. Plant sources are still usable. However, they have certain deficiencies that makes them less efficient in terms of what the body needs to do with the protein than you would really like. So, in general, if you are consuming animal sources for protein, you want to have generally between zero point 0.8 to 1.0 grams per pound of body weight. Or if you want to speak in terms of kilos, you're looking at that 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight in terms of the amount of protein you would be taking in. There is something, though, that's really important. It's one of the biggest things that bothers me when it comes to talking to people about their nutrition and how to get to their goals. And that is that people think something is a protein source when in reality it is not. It is a fat source. So the simplest one that comes to mind are nuts. Nuts are great. They do contain protein, but if you look at, say, the nutrition facts for like peanut butter or something, you'll notice that it'll probably say something along the lines of 2 tablespoons is going to be 30-ish, maybe a little more than 30 grams in it. And it's going to have like 15 or 16 grams of fat. And here we're talking about calories per gram. Protein is 4 calories per gram. We'll talk about fat more later on, but fat is 9 calories per gram. So if half of it is comprised of grams of fat, then that means more than double the calories at the most generous is still going to be from the fat. It's a fat source, not a protein source. It's incidental protein, which still counts towards that end daily goal. But keep that in mind. If you're going to have all your protein from nuts, you're mostly just having fat.
It's real funny that you mentioned the enzymes and the bioavailability of different foods because a couple months ago I was in California. We went to a health food expo out there, and some gentlemen from UC Berkeley were speaking on technology and testing they're doing right now on different bioavailabilities of things, such as plant proteins. And they came up with an enzymatic salt that you sprinkle on the top of the food, and it changes your stomach's amino acid breakdown. It changes the way that your body can receive different things. And I asked them during that, I said, so would there be other limiter reducing or limiter get rid of the limiters, unlimiters for other things like muscle growth? And they said absolutely. We just need to find the funding for it. So it's crazy that nowadays it's changing. But yeah, you have to make sure that you look at what you eat as well. Those meats that are mentioned in that last post, salami, pepperoni, deli meats, processed meat is American Heart Association a type 1 carcinogen, the same as tobacco and cigarettes. The same one is in your deli meat. It's pretty crazy. But I had to throw that in. But also, nuts are so important. They have so much great nutrients. But thinking though of them as a protein source, it's not intelligent. They're not mostly protein. They're good to have. They're great for satiation. If you want a little snack on the go, it's fantastic, perfect for you. But you're not getting your 130 grams of protein through peanuts. I'll tell you that.
No, definitely not. And there are so many interesting things when you start actually getting into the I'm gonna say that when you get into the game of actually looking at nutrition labels, and sometimes you can end up doing the math on them and you find out that there's not there's an unfortunate room for error when it comes to if they have 4 grams of protein, 4 grams of fat, and 4 grams of carbs. For some reason, when you do the math of that times four, that times four, that times nine for the carbs, fats, and then carbs, proteins, and fats, that the numbers don't add up to the same amount of calories that they're claiming. There's a lot that goes into, and I'm talking about this more a little bit later on, a lot that goes into the value of eating the same foods in the same amounts for a certain period of time to find out how your body responds to them. And that's going to be a huge thing to consider when trying to choose your foods.
Yeah, especially if you have sensitivities. We always recommend the FODMAP diet to make sure you can really hone in on literally everything with the FODMAP. It's crazy.
Yep. FODMAP is a fascinating thing.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're watching this and you don't know what FODMAP is, here's a really funny way of thinking about it. FODMAP is basically to determine how badly you fart from the foods that you eat. If it's a high FODMAP food, say hello to lots of farting. It's a fun way to look at it.
Yep.
Because farts are funny. All right. So on that note, let's move on to carbs.
Oh, speaking of farts, here we go.
So we're talking about FODMAP, which is actually a really funny segue into this because a lot of the FODMAP foods are going to be things that are misunderstood because people are like, oh, it's healthy, I should just have a ton of it. And then they end up with a really unfortunate GI situation. A couple funny examples of that are going to be like strawberries. You would think are like, oh, that's healthy, just have a ton of them. But some people can then respond to that poorly. Green beans, broccoli, those kind of foods can be high FODMAP. If you want a really funny story, I gassed out my entire family on one vacation when I was younger because I decided I really liked pears, and I decided that the morning of a 5-hour road trip, and the entire time all the windows were down, I was giggling and all happy and thought it was the funniest thing ever, while my family were just yelling at me as I was just farting up the biggest storm ever.
Shout out to the pears.
So FODMAP things, they can be delicious, but dosage makes the poison. That is one of my absolute favorite concepts when it comes to talking about nutrition, because in order to have sanity, some people need to have some sugar. They need to have some things that are deemed bad. A chocolate croissant is amazing, but it's going to have a decent amount of sugar, and it's going to have a decent amount of fats and everything. And arguably, you can make a statement that it's so not nutrient dense that there's not much benefit in having it. But sanity matters. So we're talking about trying to figure out your source for your carbs. Yeah, include the fruits, include the vegetables, but also include things that are tasty. One of the things that I'll talk to my clients about when it comes to trying to figure out what your diet should be made of is use the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your food is going to come from the more whole food sources, things where you can do. This is a little bit of a gross overstatement, but things that will grow out of the ground or eat stuff that comes out of the ground, that kind of thing, where it's whole foods, not something that's going to be made in a factory and packaged in a single package of plastic, and then you get to eat it like a Twinkie. But 20% of it can be that. And that's a good way to kind of keep a healthier relationship with food while being healthier yourself.
And I think in part of that is understanding the healthy alternatives and the alternatives that are out there. Because even if you're eating, somewhat health food, say you're eating one of those burrito bowl places, and you're consuming a bunch of omega-6 fatty acids and non-organic chicken, and God knows what's sprayed on the lettuce. But you guys have to look and see what's alternatives. If you want a sweet treat, maybe the sweet treat isn't an entire pint of ice cream. Maybe it's a few pieces of dark chocolate. Dark chocolate's actually a fermented food. It's a fermented food that helps your gut microbiome, which is something incredible, a candy. But there's lots of fruits and dried fruits and different things, alternatives that people just are afraid to try because they're addicted to Twinkies. And I think that the Twinkies are the big problem, So.
Yep. And the chocolate is actually a great example of something that you can work up towards. For me, like, I know my weakness when it comes to chocolate is I love milk chocolate, and I'm not as big a fan of a dark chocolate. But one of the things that I'll do is I'll just start increasing the percentage of the dark of the chocolate.
Oh yeah.
Through a period of time. So I'll maybe start off with 60% dark, then I'll maybe find a 65, then I might go up to 70, 72. 72 is like a decent medium for me. And I know Ghirardelli has a 72% dark chocolate. That's pretty good. And one of the things that I'll do with that is I'll use that as my chocolate as part of a chocolate protein pancake.
Nice.
And so I get to have a good little blend of having some processed stuff in it. I'm making a better choice of just going from a straight milk chocolate to a semi-dark chocolate, not a full dark, but a semi-dark chocolate, I would call it. And then you have the protein pancake mixture, where I'll then use things like egg whites in it as the liquid, so I can have even more protein and make it a little bit fluffier. And it's going to be a better choice than just putting in water and oil into the pancake, where I get to have no nutrient benefit with the water, and then the oil is just excess fat that I don't necessarily need, because I can add texture and size, volume, with having better choices for the alternatives by combining just a slightly different set of ingredients and still come out with a really good pancake that is satisfying.
In the same way that you explained last week that we just need to get out there and start doing something, right? And then we can, once we get the basics down, then you can adjust and go from there. The same exact thing goes for nutrition, right? If you're eating fast food every single day, let's just try and change a little bit. Let's start crawling. Let's just one less soda. Let's change the energy drink to sugar free. Like it's these little healthy switches that'll win us everything.
Yep. A lot of what I will talk to my clients about when these kind of situations is, okay, oh, you're just starting and you want to start paying attention to your food sources. Okay, initially, don't change anything. And when I say that, they're just like, wait, what? What do you mean don't change anything? I was like, yeah, Don't change anything. Do everything you're doing right now, but this time, just consciously choose.
Just think about it.
And what you pick, write it down on a piece of paper. And there's like, wait, that's it? And I'm like, yeah, do that. Come back to me next week, and then let's see about what happened. And usually, what happens afterwards, they come back. They're like, oh, I did not realize I was having this like twice a day for the whole period. And they're like, it's like, she's like, then they end up saying, I should cut down on that. And it ends into a situation where half the time, I don't even have to give them the directions.
Exactly.
They reveal what they already know.
Yep.
And then we start making them implement what they actually know. And I started putting small little tweaks here and there. And then by the end of a month, they're actually coming back and saying, hey, I am really annoyed at you because I have more energy and I'm eating better and I want my sugar. And I'm like, okay, well, guess what? Still have your sugar. And then they do another one like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, you're paying attention to all stuff. That's great. You're trying to be perfect. Cool. However, you still need your sanity. Have some sugar. And they're like, but I thought I wasn't allowed. I'm like, no, you are allowed. You want to do it so that way when your phase of whatever you're doing ends, you don't then just go on a binge fest. And they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah. And then I just go on a speech about how that's one of the reasons why there is such an issue with diet retention when it comes to the United States. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. We still have to get through fats because that's a whole nother thing in this entirety of the macronutrients.
One last thing on carbohydrates I got to talk about is addiction. The addiction on complex, ultra-processed, refined carbohydrates is holding America by the balls. It is. It's literally, it's sad how it's going down, but the bread is not the way the bread used to be. The genetics are not the same. The glyphosate in the wheat is not good for us. We're learning all of this stuff slowly but surely. We're finding it all out. Just try and stay on top of whatever you're eating and understand where it comes from, because we can't trust other people to know what's in our food. We've learned that over the past 40 years.
Yep. But baby steps. Whenever you're starting to implement this stuff, baby steps.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So let's get into the fats. And my little fun subtitle for this is that fats are the most demonized.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is hyperbole, but there is some good, legitimate demonization, but there's a lot of scary demonization about it. Fats are a great thing once you understand the sources, but more importantly, once you realize how much you're actually having. Quite literally, just today, I was talking to one of my clients, and she's a fantastic lady, but she weighs in the mid 200s. She's tall, so it's not the worst thing ever for her. And the good news is that she's really strong. We work in the gym, and she gets stronger, all this other stuff and everything, but she does complain to me about not being able to lose weight. So today, for our session, we actually did not go into the gym at all. All we did was talk about her diet and how to keep track of it. And what I ended up pinpointing is that what's actually keeping her back from losing weight is she doesn't realize how much oil she uses while she cooks.
Yep.
And I started explaining to her, like, listen, fat is the most calorie dense of the macronutrients. Not only that, when you are using oil, it is 100% fat. There's nothing else in there that can take up space. There's no water. There's nothing solid to create.
Hopefully there's nothing else in your oil.
Hopefully, yes. But for this example, we're just going to say, here's the perfect oil, just to make it easy on this scenario. And here's what we end up looking at. We looked at how she cooks for her family and makes family meals, and they have to be tasty. And sometimes her husband will even come in, taste it, and be like, it needs a little more. And he grabs the oil and puts some of it in there. And then switch around and tastes like, yeah, that's where it is. And we talk about how then, if you're just doing one single tablespoon of oil, whatever kind it is, it's going to be about 15 grams. But remember, 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So you're looking at a little under 140 calories in a single tablespoon of a food that is not going to fill you up at all. It does not occupy space in your stomach, and you can feel empty after you just, in this case, ingested for some reason a tablespoon of oil. So it's a great source of energy because the density, but when you're trying to do something like lose weight, it can make it impossible. And we did the math for her, and what we found out is that she's probably adding over her whole week, over all the cooking that she does and the way that she does it, her fried eggs in the morning, these dishes at night, she's probably adding, let me see if I can remember the numbers. I think it worked out to about 600 calories on a conservative estimate per day through cooking and the use of oils, butters, and nut butters, all these other things, which equated to her over the whole week. If it's 600 calories over the whole week each day, that's 4,200 calories that she has not accounted for in her math of why she's not losing weight. So she was off by 4,000 calories over the week. And it takes a deficit of 3,500 calories to lose 1 pound. So we just take out all that excess oil that she didn't know she was having. It would probably then put her into a calorie deficit, and then all of a sudden she would start losing weight.
One tweak.
She's actually eating what she thinks she's eating.
Yeah, just one tweak. I just saw a video on TikTok about that actually. Someone was showing the proper amount. Someone poured a proper amount into a pan and then the usual amount, and it really made me think about how much oil I'm using. But there's also many benefits to extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil, and you got to ingest those things to keep your brain healthy.
Yes, you do. But again, remember I was saying earlier about dosage makes the poison.
100%.
If you have too much of anything, it's going to be detrimental. The classic example of this is that you can die of overdosing on water. Water, what people say is the most healthy thing ever. Everyone's always drink more water, drink more water. Technically speaking, there is actually a threshold of where you will die from just drinking water.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So some specifics on fat. There are some buzzwords that people will freak out about when it comes to fat. Saturated fat, trans fat, they will lessen your lifespan. And to some degree, there is truth there. But again, dosage makes the poison. If you have a small amount of them, you're getting your blood work done with your regular doctor checks, and your cholesterol's coming back fine, nothing is going crazy in the red, you're functioning just fine, you're running around, your heart is healthy, all this other stuff, then you know what? You don't need to worry about it. But people will worry about things too soon and too much. And you have to also remember, stress itself is a killer. So if you stress too much about, oh my God, saturated fat is bad, and I had 2 grams of it, guess what? Your stressing about is actually damaging you more than just having those 2 grams of saturated fat.
Yeah, it's insane. And I just heard Casey Means talking, and she said that the average human in America that lives in America, 60% of their calories come from seed oils, from fat seed oils. 60%.
That's a large number.
That is so sad.
That is. So here's what I'll say about seed oils is that, again, dosage makes the poison. You have a crazy amount, bad things are going to happen. You have an appropriate amount, and you are probably fine, assuming you don't have an underlying health condition that is directly related to consuming whatever it is that you are consuming and having a negative effect from it.
Yep. Find out what works for you. Run with it.
Yep. But here's some generalities. In general, saturated fat, trans fat, you want to have less of. Notice I'm not saying zero. Everything has its purpose in the body. 100%. You want to have, in general, more unsaturated fats, specifically monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, which are the classic examples of salmon, avocados, and those kind of things. And we're talking about seed oils, but notice flaxseed, polyunsaturated fats. There's a large degree of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to talking about all of these categories that seem scary. There is an exception to every rule when it comes to nutrition, training, and all of that. All you have to do is try to take a step back and look at the question of, is this actually relevant to me and my situation? Because for some people, Worrying about saturated fats, not relevant. Just the way they like to eat and everything, it's not a concern. So don't worry about it unnecessarily. There's enough going on in the world and in your life that is worth stressing about, and don't do it unnecessarily.
Yeah, 100%.
Then, and you have to remember, fats are a needed part of life. So you don't want to then be like, oh, fats are terrible. Therefore, I'm going to have 60% of my calories come from carbs. And I'm going to have 38% of my calories come from protein and 2% from fats just because can't avoid it completely. Guess what? Now you are going to have health issues because you will not have enough fats to produce essential things like hormones that are essential for your life and functioning in your life.
Yeah, yeah, and then we talked with the nutritionist oncologist Jess Higgins, and she said that the three things that you need when you have cancer is fats, fibers, and protein, because you need your brain to be healthy and strong when you're fighting against things, and that goes for everything. If you have asthma, you need to make sure that your body's locked in so it knows what to fight. It goes for everything. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yep, yep. And oh, we can get a whole another conversation about having health conditions, being under chemotherapy and wasting diseases, and the importance of protein training and how you have to do something because your body's trying to get rid of what you need to tell it that it needs. And that's a whole nother story. But
Yep.
again, the nutrition side of it is protein.
And the
Protein.
story, yep, the story starts here. Story starts here.
Yep. So now we're going to start getting into the practical aspect of using what you now know with the carbs, the fats, and the proteins and everything. And we're going to try to figure out then what it is that you need to do for your own life. And one of the first things that you need to understand is where you're starting now. We've already talked about it a little bit where we're like, oh yeah, take baby steps. My story about talking to clients and my first step for you to do is nothing. These things are relevant because you have to work in a reasonable, realistic, sustainable manner, and going straight from 0 to 100 is only going to end in failure and possibly eating disorders.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I mean. 6 years of wrestling and then being in the army doing height and weight tests were not good for my dietary restrictions. The relationship with food when doing those things is ridiculous. And then the fad diets of America, we already talked about them. It's just too much, man. You just got to look
Yeah,
at what you're doing and read the ingredients.
yeah. The nutrition aspect of having a sport that has a weight class or a job that requires a fit test or any of those kind of things can lead to some really drastic things. The first example that comes to mind is a water cut. When you have a weigh in and you know you are above that weight, so you then take between 24 and 48 hours to dump as much body water as possible. And I have seen people, I think the most I've ever seen someone drop, and it was insane, it was probably a little over 20 pounds in 2 days of just straight body water.
No good.
And they walked off of that scale and into a medical room where they got an IV because that was the only hope that they had of being able to get water back into them at any kind of a pace that would allow them to then compete the next day.
Well, the one time I got an IV, I was in the field in the army, and we were in Illesheim in Germany, and we stayed up all night drinking, and we had an evaluation the next day. So the medics actually pulled me into the medic tent and gave me an IV in their tent in the freezing cold, and I felt a lot better, and I performed very well. So I could see how an IV might be beneficial, and definitely stay hydrated and don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna pivot for a second and talk about water. Because water is something that you see in apps and they're like, track all your water. People are like, oh yeah, make sure you hydrate. Oh, you want to eat X amount of food, but you also have to have Y amount of water in the day too. I'm going to simplify the water thing for you in one sentence. Don't stress too much about it. Just have enough so that you pee every couple hours and your pee is clear to mostly clear. If you do that, you are hydrated. Keep it simple like that. Don't worry about trying to track your food, track your water, then examine what your pee looks like to then adjust the exact amount that you're supposed to be having to have this happen. And then if you're working out, then you have to then add this X. Don't do any of that. Just look at your pee. If it's clearish, you're peeing semi regularly, guess what? You're fine enough.
Yeah, 100%. And then, bringing a water bottle around with you is very important. And then understanding the source of your water is also very important. So you don't want to be drinking toxic water. We got to be looking at microplastics and understanding the bottles and the source of your water. It's also really important. If you check the EWG guide, it'll tell you what's in your local city's tap water, and I would highly suggest checking it out.
Yep. And the interesting thing about that is that for a lot of people, it's not going to make much of a measurable difference in your own life in the short term. So it makes it easy to neglect that aspect. However, you can make an argument that, well, you're only looking at the short term, but what about the long term? So you can do things to take precautions that some people might call extreme, but it all depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people are not going to worry too much about it and just be like, listen, I'm just having what I'm having and I'll deal with the consequences later. And that's their choice. You can also then have the people who are like, you know what, I'm going to look at the website. I'm going to look at, okay, I see the stuff is in it and wow, that particular thing kind of worries me. I'm going to do my research. Okay, now I remember that saying dosage makes the poison. So if I look at the amount that's in there, am I actually at risk? You know what? I think that might be a little above the risk threshold. Okay, I'm going to get a filter so I know, because I know that this is in my water that is my only choice to drink for free. And I don't want to pay for water. I can pay for a couple filters. Doing a logical process like that based off of the data that is relevant to you, with the umbrella being what is going to add to your life being a requirement, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a good
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, take it at your own pace and then see how you can factor it in. And I think that's the crawl stage. But this is what we're talking about. We don't want to give anyone a specific you must do, blah blah blah. Let's just get started. Let's get out here and look at what's going into our stuff, get informed, do our own research, figure out what's actually going on, and trust reliable sources.
Mhm.
And then make adjustments as you go.
Exactly. So let's take a look at some ways that you can do this, whether you are crawling, walking, or running. And then what does that actually look like for what you are doing? You'll notice a couple interesting things right off the bat on this slide when we're looking at that. Notice my frequency options are 6 times a week or 7 times a week. There's a very, very strong reason about that. And it basically boils down to the duration. Look at the options on the duration for this. You're crawling, guess what? Your duration's still lifetime. You're running, walking, doesn't matter. This is all about your entire life. You are most likely not going to go days and days and days without ever taking in some kind of nutrient, whether it is caloric or non-caloric. Something is going to be entering your system, or you're not going to be able to be alive. So, how do you take a look at your crawl position and then work up? And why is it that I only have the options for crawling being 6 times a week all the way up to 7 times a week on the run? I'll answer that question with a simple bit of math. Let's say you are someone who has been dieting, trying to lose weight, and you are perfect Monday through Friday, and you're great. You're like, I've done the math. I'm 500 calories down on every single one of those days. Huh. Why am I not losing weight? And then you look at their Saturday and Sunday. Oh, you're partying every Saturday. Oh, you look at your Sunday and there's a brunch with some friends going on, and then you go to dinner at your mom's and you know that she makes the most amazing meals and you just go to town on them. You've now spent 2 days erasing all of that amazing effort you put in for Monday through Friday. So then guess what? You're losing all sorts of mental willpower and energy, and all you're doing is just taking 3 steps forward during the week over those 5 days, and then in 2 days you take those 3 steps right back. It's harder to do that if you're good for 6 days. Then it's going to be more likely that you're not going to be able to do so much damage in that one day that you're going to erase all of your progress. But reality still strikes, and math is still true. If you are down 500 calories for 6 days, you are at a 3,000 calorie deficit. It's almost enough to lose a pound of fat a week. But if you then go up by 1,500 calories extra on that last day, you've cut that entire progress by half. Some progress is still better than no progress, but that's why crawling is still 6 times a week at the minimum.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so true that you just have to stay on top of everything. You have to look at you can't have 3 cheat days. You might be able to have 3 cheat meals, or 3 cheat items, but 3 cheat days isn't going to do it. And Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it doesn't work that way. I tried for so long in the military. I mean, working out Monday through Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm drinking and doing whatever I want to do, getting drunk, eating pizza rolls. That stuff sets you back. It really, really does, especially when you're drinking a lot of beers. Beer is not good for you, man. That's gonna get your belly big.
Yep. So this is a great side note that I can now pop in on. We've talked about the calories per gram of carbs, 4. Calories per gram of protein, 4. And then we have the big boy being fat with 9 calories per gram. But here's another fun fact: alcohol, 7 calories per gram. 7 calories per gram. And it's something that people don't actually know, because the amount of times, like when I was in college, that I heard, oh, alcohol can't be processed by the body. It's 0 calories. Like, yeah, so if you just drink hard liquor, yeah, those calories don't count. And
I
I was
wish.
like, yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was already actually into lifting in that point, everything, and I'd done all the research, nutrition, and I'm doing my own thing, and I was like, that's not right. And then one day in my biochemistry class, my biochem teacher says the exact same thing. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I thought there were 7 calories per gram of alcohol. He's like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, that's whatever. It's 7 calories per gram. And I think it must have been the fact that I had such a concrete number and was so sure. He looked it up. The next class he comes in, he's like, all right, so today we're going to look at how alcohol is processed by the body, because it has 7 calories per gram. And I was in my seat, and I probably should like a little thing like, yep, no, I'm being professional. And it was the fascinating thing, because this is a guy who's been teaching this class, I think at that point, for like 15 years, talking about all the processes in biochemistry that you are doing to like transform energy. And even he was not aware that it was 7 calories per gram of alcohol, because some myths are just pervasive. And that kind of a misconception coming from someone who's an expert in the field, and then all the people he's taught that to, really goes to show that there is a real strong benefit to making sure that you double check everything. And I encourage you to double check everything that I say. And if for some reason something I say, you're like, listen, I thought it was this and everything, you look it up and you find out that you are right and I'm wrong, I would love a message about that. I would really like to make sure that I'm not that biochemistry teacher teaching something as a fact when it is factually incorrect.
Agreed. And now everything's changing so much. There's so much information out there that's both positive and negative. You can look at any issue online, whether it's nutrition, political, anything. Is this dress blue or black? Nobody can come to an agreement on anything. So, I mean, trying to get your just do your research. All we're trying to do is spark curiosity. We want you to do your research and you to look into the things that we're saying and you to make the decisions on what you're going to do and for you to be in control of your life. So,
Yeah. Okay. So now, when we look into the other aspects of this, and we look at the intensity, some of this is pretty intuitive, and we don't need to talk about it way too much. But eating out is a good way to start when you're crawling, and then just making better choices. But food prep is going to be a little more accurate, a little more predictable. Crawling, you do have freedom of choice, and you can make decisions, but you want to eat this sometime, that other time. But to really progress, sometimes you have to have every day pre-planned. That takes a lot of effort. You can go from non-competitive to being competitive. Competitive is going to again require another layer of intensity and specificity throughout the whole thing. But You can also just be a little more conscious of just what is in the food. So if you're crawling, you're not going to pay much attention to the ingredients in the food. You're going to pay more attention to the larger aspects, the macronutrients. But once you get a feel for that, you can start getting into the goals of having nothing artificial. And the thing is, you're going to have to basically figure out where you are on that spectrum. Because full transparency on my end, some of this stuff I don't do. Like, for example, one of the biggest topics that people are going to be really butting heads on is the topic of artificial sweeteners. Me personally, with my conclusion on what I have read and learned and everything, is that I will eat and drink anything that has artificial sweeteners. I don't mind. I look at my belief of dosage makes the poison. I look at my review of the literature and what I've seen, and people who I respect, what they believe, the literature that they have shown, sometimes the literature that they have written and everything. And I've come to my own personal conclusion that artificial sweeteners require a dosage much larger than anything that would ever approach actually having to experience negative effects. But I've also made the same conclusion that this is based off of what we know now. And that's something Joe has done an amazing job of talking about, is how things change. New information gets discovered. We have people who were great, fantastic experts 20 years ago, but at this point, some of their stuff is outdated. So right now, based off of what I have seen, I don't see a negative towards artificial sweeteners. But I'm also aware of what we don't know. We don't quite know all of the effects on the microbiome and how your gut may handle it with extended use over time. What we've got is an understanding that it's probably not, but we can't ever speak in absolutes because you can't claim that everything is known.
Yeah, the hardest thing there is to study is how the body breaks down different things. Okay, the way that they actually do studies is they feed pigs things and then kill them midway through, and then test the things that are going through their blood. Okay, that's how they test. It's incredible. I agree with you 100%. I think that artificial sweeteners are important, and I think they're a big step in a lot of people's lives to get onto a healthier track. And I also believe that nothing artificial should be going in you. Now, do I abide by that 100%? No. Did I drink energy drinks for 15 years straight? Yes. Did I smoke cigarettes for 10 years? Absolutely. But does that mean that now, with the information that I have, will I make different decisions? Yes. I think personally, I agree with Alex. I believe you are right. I think that the studies don't show, and I think that the studies haven't been done enough personally. And I think that the studies that are currently out may be backed by people who have interest in artificial sweeteners and not public health. However, I think that with the information that's out there now, I think generally it's a better alternative than drinking full caloric sweeteners, which is the worst thing that you can do, is drink sugar. It's the worst thing that you could do. So the crawl, walk, run. Crawl, please just drink an artificial sweetener. All right, walk. Let's switch to some sparkling water, and then run. You can do whatever you want. Just try and make it not artificial. That's what I think.
Yep. So you just got to figure out where you fall on that spectrum, and if you are happy with that choice and it doesn't hurt anybody else, go nuts.
100%.
Yeah.
God bless America. Freedom.
Freedom. Yes. All right. So now let's talk about the diets as a whole and the options you have. So it's really simply put into three different categories. You have a caloric surplus, where you're going for weight gain and muscle gain. You can be in a deficit, where you're going for weight loss, maybe more specifically fat loss. And here comes a really interesting bit. Some people, based off of how new they are to training generally, can actually then lose weight but gain muscle in just a little bit smaller amount than the weight that they are losing from fat. Meaning they're going to lose weight overall, but their muscle mass is going up at the same time. Generally, you're going to be seeing that in people who are much newer to training. If you are more advanced and you've been training for a while, then you're not really going to expect that to happen. Like for me, I've been lifting for 23 years. If I'm in a deficit, the odds of me gaining muscle in it are really, really small. I already have to do a lot of work just to maintain my muscle mass while I'm in a caloric deficit. But we can then look at a maintenance diet where your calories are going to be equal, you do not have any weight change, and it's possible that you're going to lose fat and gain muscle at equal rates. But the main purpose for maintenance is, in my opinion, and this is again my opinion, the main purpose of maintenance is to regain sanity and health. It's not some where you're going to be forcing yourself to eat more than might be comfortable for a surplus. It's not going to be you starving yourself in a deficit. It's going to be you being able to coast and just enjoy that you have less food stress.
And I fight for everyone to be at maintenance because that is the greatest thing ever. Not having to cut or to bulk. Bulking is very, very difficult. Putting on muscle is really hard. Okay, I've put on muscle and I've lost a lot of fat, and I'm telling you, I think that putting on muscle might be harder. Um,
It's not a might, it is. It is.
yeah. At least for me. Okay, I know there's a lot of people who do crazy stuff, but maintenance is the goal for me. Health and longevity and being strong, happy, healthy, and strong is my goal and my purpose. So
Yeah. So I guess you can call it semi anecdotal evidence about how much easier it is to gain and lose fat than it is for muscle. You've seen people like Biggest Loser is an example of this, where people will get themselves to a really high weight that is potentially over 400, 500, 600 pounds, and then they'll go on this amazing fat loss journey and lose hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and then they might even shoot back up again to the weight they were before and then lose it again, and they're making these shifts of potentially hundreds of pounds of fat. But have you ever seen someone make hundreds of pounds of change in muscle? No. No. People can gain and lose fat so much faster. If you want to have an interesting number, I estimate that in my 23 years of lifting, I have probably gained 60 pounds of muscle. And if you do the math on that, I'm looking at a little over 2 pounds of muscle on average a year gained. And that's with me making this a really important part of my life for that entire time. The only times that I've had more than a week off of training have been because of surgeries or sickness in that entire time.
yeah, and then even the surgery talk we're gonna get into next time about recovery, but the post op on surgeries is what can really make or break someone. Seriously, seriously, those frozen shoulders are not a joke. But we'll
Yeah.
get to that next week.
Yep. 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 Little preview for you guys. So, when you're trying to figure out how you are going to organize your diet, the goal is what determines everything. And it's going to determine whether you're higher on carbs or higher on fats. But you'll notice the protein part in the bottom, I have made consistent because I will freely admit I have bias for that just with my background. So keep that in mind. Some people are going to have less need of protein, others are going to have more needs of protein. But no one is going to 0 grams of protein unless they have some very, very specific health issue. So keep that in mind. Protein is generally going to be a universal thing for all diets for people who are in a standard or even just semi-standard state of health.
Of being healthy.
Mm-hmm. So, first type, weight/fat loss, requires a caloric deficit. Simply put, you burn more calories than you consume. Therefore, you lose weight. The key thing here is that you want to shift that weight loss to be more fat loss than muscle loss. If you lose muscle, you are also losing some of your resting metabolic rate, the amount of calories you burn just by existing. If you lose muscle, your resting metabolic rate goes down. If you gain muscle, your resting metabolic rate goes up. If you had me having the same amount of calories that I eat now, which I can tell you right now, I am losing weight at eating 2,500 calories a day. I tell some people that, and they're like, "You seriously? What if I had that? I'd be gaining a pound a week." but it's the difference of generally just muscle mass. I have, if you take that 60-pound number and say, I have someone who's the exact same height on me, but they weigh 140, but I weigh 200, and the difference is 60 pounds of muscle, then my resting metabolic weight is going to be way higher than theirs because everything else will be pretty similar. So you want to make sure you keep that muscle while you are losing weight by having higher protein and you are resistance training. Cardio will not maintain your muscle. Cardio in that state will actually help you burn muscle off. Be wary of that. Cardio is a good tool for adding calories lost to your situation, but you still need to have the resistance training to give your muscles a reason to stay.
And I think personally, my secret weapon for fat loss is protein and fiber. Protein's going to keep you full. Fiber's going to push it through. It calories in, calories out is a real thing. It's real. It's science. The amount of calories in versus the amount of calories out is up for debate. We cannot trust these labels. Labels can be up to 20% inaccurate either direction for caloric values, right? And then also, if we eat a large meal, say we eat a Big Mac, right? It's supposed to be 550 calories. And then we drink some fiber, some insoluble fiber right after that. We don't know how many calories our body is going to consume and how much is going to push through. We don't. So finding out the balance for you that's all I keep saying this entire podcast or class, but it's always about balance for you and finding out how your body reacts to it.
Yep, exactly. So what you kind of want to do is use your calories that you are estimating that you are eating, and you want to be consistent with the amount of physical activity that you have, and then adjust accordingly while using the same numbers that you have established and the same foods that you have established. You still want enough variety in your foods that you are not missing out on any micronutrients, but if you know that your general food sources are going to be the same every single day for the next 3 months, well then, now you can basically consider your nutrition information for those foods as correct because you've tested it. So then you can then take your plateau that you experience, we'll just say for easiness sake, a month in those 3 months, and you hit a plateau. Okay, I am no longer in a caloric deficit. I have lost weight. My resting metabolic rate has gone down, and my body has adapted to what I have been consuming. Therefore, I have to take the next step in order for the weight loss to continue. I need to now somehow either decrease the amount of calories I'm having even further or increase the amount of calories that I burn. One of the things that trips people up is they assume that they don't need to change anything and they'll keep their weight loss the same for the entire 3 months, but that's not going to happen. You have to adjust as your body does. And it's one of the things that also tricks people into thinking calories in, calories out is not true. Calories in, calories out is always true. What people misestimate is going to be either the calories in, where they don't track everything that I have. Funny story on that. I was helping my mom out with some of this stuff. And when I told her that she had to change how she was tracking her calories, because she was doing it for a while, I was like, okay, like I'm noticing this, but I don't see your gummy vitamins, your gummy calcium, your gummy melatonin that you take at night, and your fish oil pills that you have in the morning. You have over 100 calories that you're having every day, but you're not counting them. And she was just like, no, but I love my gummy vitamins. And she was very upset with me, but she got over it.
That's hilarious, dude. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Step one is just taking a step back and looking at it. The same thing you told to the people who don't change anything, just write it down. That's literally all of it. Just taking a step back and looking at your diet, your sleep, your exercise, how your body hurts, how your body reacts to the food that you're eating or the food that you stop eating.
Yep. All right. And then as far as the calories out goes, what people don't recognize there is that the calorie out that you do also changes. As your body feels that it's not getting enough nutrients, well, guess what? It's going to make you unconsciously do less. and then you start burning fewer calories than you think you should. Your body processes actually start changing. An example of that is that I will actually physically run hotter when I'm in a calorie surplus. If I'm in a calorie deficit, my body actually cools down. It does not produce as much heat. And I've done this for long enough that I can recognize that change. I'll notice that my frequency that I'll wear like hoodies or jackets and everything, if I'm on a deficit, increases. If I'm on a surplus, it could be 40 degrees outside and I'm running around in a t-shirt and feeling just fine. It's crazy how adaptive some people's metabolisms are. And I have the unfortunate truth where my body adapts to the calories that I am at very quickly. So I have to keep making changes in order for me to continue to lose. And I'll tell you right now, it's really frustrating. Mhm. Okay, so let's talk about those steps. There are styles of dieting. There are a bunch of different fancy named diets, and every single one of them operates under calories in, calories out, whether you think it or not. You do keto, you do Atkins, well, guess what? You're reducing the calories you eat because you've eliminated an entire macronutrient. Okay, you're going to try intermittent fasting. Guess what? You are limiting the calories that you eat because you've limited the amount of time that you can eat. You're doing Mediterranean diet, great. They're giving you the food sources that is acceptable. And anything that's not in those food sources, guess what? You've eliminated those calorie possibilities. Every single one of them functions on something along those lines. Weight Watchers uses the points, even if they're saying you still have all the macronutrients and all the foods, but we've attached point values that are somewhat coinciding with the amount of calories in them. They're also tricking you into the calories in, calories out by controlling the calories via the points.
Yeah, you think you're eating a cheeseburger.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and as far as this goes, if you're trying to figure out what is the best one for you, assuming you don't have the goal of a elite athletic performance or something, then it doesn't matter. Your point then is just the one that you can adhere to sustainably and is not going to cost you too much in terms of your sanity. That's the correct one.
Yeah.
That's the correct one.
Yeah, I think for me, I intermittent fast every day. I skip breakfast. I love breakfast. So sometimes I have breakfast at 11 or 12, but I skip breakfast and then I generally eat two large meals and make sure that I have something to sustain me over the night and for the next 16 hours that I'm going to fast. But I feel like that's really what works for me. I feel good in the morning when I wake up. I'm not hungry. If I have to go without food, I don't have those carb cravings that I used to have. I tried going keto back when I was in Slovakia in 2013, and you know how long I lasted? I lasted a meal, dude. Dude, I
Really?
quit. I quit at lunch. Okay, it was like they served us like some pasta with bread and butter, and I was like, well, I guess I'm done keto.
That is the fastest, fastest abandoning
I was like,
of
dude, I'm over here benching all this weight. I need to be yeah eating something.
That's fantastic. All right. So here's my last point on the method of dieting and how if you're not wanting to be an elite athlete, it doesn't matter. But if you do want to be an elite athlete, it does matter. And that has to do with intermittent fasting specifically. Intermittent fasting is fantastic for general life, general health. But intermittent fat loss dieting will actually result in a greater proportion of muscle loss than a diet where you continuously eat throughout the whole day. You'll still lose the same amount of weight, and that's what the studies have shown. But I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say with intermittent fasting, 30% of the weight loss was muscle and 70% of it was fat. You add in continuous eating, and then it might flip flop, and you end up losing a much smaller amount of muscle and a greater proportion of fat, which in the long term will give you a better body composition because you're able to retain more muscle. More muscle means more athletic performance.
Yeah, and a lot of people even cycle ketogenesis, right? They'll go on keto and then off of keto to let their body bounce back and feel that change again. And it's really important to look at how it's going for you though, because it really feels different if you change your diet to whole foods after eating processed foods and drinking calories all the time. It does feel different. Your body does change.
Yep. Yep. All right. Then you have weight and muscle gain. This is the fun one because you get to eat. It's simple. You burn fewer calories than you consume and you gain weight. You do hard resistance training, you have adequate protein, and guess what? You gain muscle. But again, not all weight and muscle gain diets are going to be created equally, and you have to find the one that works for you, that you like, that you can adhere to, that gives you all the requirements you need and will be done in a way where you can actually be able to eat your next meal. Because one of the things that's going to come as a price is going to be you're going to at some point not want to eat. As crazy as that sounds, because you're just tired after 2 months or so of just eating an excess of calories every single day, that at some point when your body adapts and you have to ramp it up to the next calorie level in order to start gaining weight again, that you're just like, I have no desire to continue stuffing my face with this. And so you then can get into some interesting situations where you just like, you know what, screw it. A pint of ice cream has a lot of calories. That's where I'm going. And you have to try to remember, well, if you do that and you go to the ice cream, now you're getting into, if you're having a full pint of it, that you're probably going to be higher on the saturated fats and those fats that we don't want to have as much of. And then if you're doing that and you're gaining weight, and then you start skyrocketing that weight gain with the main source of calories being ice cream and trying to use butter while you cook, that's when you can start getting into some health issues, because at this point you may just be starting to make yourself fat and you may be outpacing the benefits that you're getting from the resistance training. So you have to be careful and aware of that aspect of purposefully gaining weight. And that's why I, in this situation, recommend that you only gain, depending on how big you are, maybe even a quarter of a pound a week to half a pound a week. And you try and measure that weight gain over time to try to make sure that you don't have deleterious health effects while you're trying to increase your muscle mass.
Yeah, perfect. I was wondering, do you suggest anyone do a dirty bulk?
No,
Why not?
because the reason for that is going to be based off of how hard it is to recover after it combined with the amount of time you can dirty bulk. So let's add some numbers to this so you can paint the entire picture. Let's take a 200-pound male who has been lifting for a decent amount of time and has gotten to the point where it's hard for them to gain muscle. And they're like, I want to gain as much muscle as possible. And they decide they're going to dirty bulk. So they start eating everything in sight. And they, in the span of 2 months, have gained 20 pounds. And they're like, oh, this is great. I'm so strong and everything. But I'm starting to get fat to the point where I don't like how I look. I think I need to cut back down again and do another diet, fat
I'm
loss diet.
breaking out. I'm farting. I'm getting sleep apnea.
Exactly. Exactly. So they end up dieting back down again, and they lose a pound a week. And that's amazing. And they cut down all the way down to 205. So they've lost 25 pounds. That's amazing. They're like, cool. I gained 5 pounds. That's like solid lean mass. That's phenomenal. I'm going to do it again. And then they spend 8 weeks bulking, but then 25 weeks cutting. Compare that to someone who is like, all right, I'm 200 pounds. I want to get to 230 pounds, but I'm going to do it slowly. So I'm going to gain 1 pound a week and do it measured, and that'll be enough that I'll maximize my muscle gain for the entire time that I'm working out. And so they go from 200 to 230 pounds, but they do it in 30 weeks instead of the 8 of the dirty bulk. They have now spent more than triple the amount of time actively gaining muscle. And then let's say they do the exact same thing where they cut back down, and just for math's sake, we'll say they also go down to 205, even though it'd probably be higher than that in this comparison. They go down to 205 and they spend 25 weeks doing their cut. They spent 30 weeks bulking, 25 weeks cutting. That's more weeks on the bulk side, fewer on the cutting side. More net muscle gained in that time than the dirty bulk. You have 8 weeks of muscle gain to 25 weeks of dieting. And you have the same exact weight change, but the 30 weeks of muscle gain, you're going to get a hell of a lot more muscle than the 8 weeks of muscle gain.
Yeah, and I have a question for you as well. Would you recommend so bulking and cutting? This is what everyone says. Should I bulk? Should I cut? Should I do this? Should I do that? Um, Now, what age do you think is okay to start cutting weight? Cutting weight for non-obese, normal weight individuals, teenagers. Let's say teenagers. What age do you think teenagers should start thinking about cutting weight?
So that comes with a healthy dose of caveats. So you have different scenarios, some where it's okay, some where it's not okay. Let's say you have someone who is 16 years old. They've been on the football team for a year or two, and they decided they like the weight training side more than the football, and they're going to dedicate all their time to doing the weightlifting. And they decide they want to be a competitive bodybuilder because they've been doing this for 3 months and they love every bit of it, and they're reading every single thing they possibly can. They're learning. They've found some people online who are pros that are friendly, and they start talking to them, and they're so engaged in it, and they're absorbing everything like a sponge. And they decide, okay, I've learned all stuff about nutrition. I am now going to try to do this bulking and cutting thing. I'm paying attention to my protein. I want to do it properly. Okay, so I got to have the vegetables aspect along with it. Look at my fiber count in relation to the amount of calories I'm having. All right, this is good. And I'll do it sustainably and smart. I'll do it so I gain a half a pound a week. Someone like that, yeah, go for it. But let's take another example. And we have a 16-year-old who was on the football team for a year or two and decided they like the lifting aspect more than the football aspect. And they're like, oh, this is great. I know if I eat more, I'll gain more. And so they go ahead and start eating everything they can. And they go into a state where they're like, oh, I don't like how I look anymore. How do I how do I get under this? I'm just gonna go for it. Eat less. And then all of a sudden they end up being irresponsible about it, and then they start hurting themselves with doing weird things in the gym, and they're not able to recover, and they're just beating themselves down into a hole. That's the same exact scenario as the responsible one, but this person does not have the personality for it. And we'll take a third example in this as well. Let's say there is a 16-year-old girl who is a little overweight and she's getting made fun of. And this is an unfortunately common occurrence. And then they're like, getting made fun of my weight. I'm just going to stop eating. I have to cut down. And then you get into a story of eating disorders, anorexia, and the thought process that they always have to go lower. They always have to go lower. Then you have an extreme, unhealthy, and potentially deadly case of that feeling of needing to change their weight. All of this is going to boil down to how responsible, methodical, and investigative the person in the scenario is. If they have the brain and the willpower to do it responsibly after learning about it, go ahead, cut, bulk, do all that stuff because you're able to keep it in perspective. But if you lose that perspective and you're thinking, oh, I just got to make the gains for the next week or two and I'm going to do it as best as I can, and that means as much as I can, then you don't have the right mentality. And then for you, it's not. And if you go to the point of harming your health, then guess what? The answer for you is no, too.
Yeah, I think that it's an easy way to get hurt if you do it wrong. And I think it's a great tool if you use it properly. But then I also truly, truly believe that teenage children really need to watch themselves because they're going through puberty. If you're in a cut and you don't have enough protein in you, your body's not gonna fire off the right cylinders. If you don't build your brain's fat stores and protein stores up correctly, then your endocrine system's not going to operate correctly. You're not going to grow right. So you need to make sure that it's done correctly. If done wrong, it's really, really bad. So you got to make sure it's done right.
Yep, exactly. It is really, really important to understand the hows and the whys and to learn about it before you start doing it.
100%.
It's the people who jump and dive right into what they think is correct without having done the learning, without having spent time around people who know more than they do. Those are the ones who get into trouble.
Yep, true.
Yeah. Okay. So then we got the fun one of maintenance, where you get to get your sanity back. You just spent your last 12 weeks in a cut. You've lost a good amount of weight and you're chiseled, nice six pack and everything. And now you have to figure out what next. Don't go straight into a bulk. You need time to transition. You need time to make sure that you have maintained, or at the very least, have enough time to regain a healthy relationship with food. Because your diet adherence at the cut and at the very end, even just saying no to that birthday cake because you know it's going to push you over your calories and everything, and it hurts you to do that. You need to have a time where you can say yes to that birthday cake and be guilt free about it. You need to have the time to rebuild that stomach capacity to be able to eat again. And you need to make sure that you are still training hard while you're doing this, but you'll notice things like you're actually going to be sleeping better. You're going to be less stressed. You're going to have more willpower to use throughout your day. And that comes from a responsible maintenance where you are enjoying the fact that you can have a little bit more of everything.
Yeah, maintenance is a happier life than cutting or bulking for some people.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. But it's a tricky, misunderstood thing. Because if you notice, even the terminology that you're using, Joe, is like, oh, yeah, cutting, bulking, cutting, bulking. But no one ever talks about, oh, yeah, you want to cut maintenance, bulk maintenance, cut maintenance, or something like that. It's one of those aspects that somehow falls beside what people like. It's just there, but no one does it. It's not the fun. It's not the glamorous one.
Right.
It's boring to say, yeah, I'm not changing anything right now. Like what? But you have to progress. You have to do it. No, you have to make sure you can do those things from a safe point. That's where maintenance comes in.
Make sure you're happy, healthy, and strong.
Exactly. I've actually even heard some people try to dissuade the phrase of maintenance phase and instead call it a health phase.
That's what I call it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, let's be honest. You can look at me. I'm someone who has cut, bulked, and done that stuff for a really long time. And I will freely admit I have not spent enough time in a purposeful maintenance where I've gotten to just enjoy, because I'm not the most mentally healthy when it comes to this stuff. And I will freely admit that. The amount of body dysmorphia I have is not healthy. I've gotten better about it over the years. And you can tell because I'm trying to teach about maintenance phases and health phases and recognizing where you are in terms of the crawl, walk, run, where you are in terms of your comfortability, where you are in terms of your choices. You hear how I talk about my choice to still have artificial sweeteners. I've done my best to learn, but I've learned that because I've messed up a bunch. And now I find myself older. I don't want to say wiser because I'm not that wise. I'm just stubborn. My stubborn in my attempts to always learn more and get better. But one of the things that I now find myself teaching is to have phases where you can just coast.
Yeah, enjoy life. Goddamn.
Yeah, and so it's something I am personally working on and letting you know that, because it's not something that ever ends, and it's something that I'm going to be working on for a while, is to have that comfortability with not forcing myself to try to be making progress in some way.
Yep. Yep. Be happy with you.
Mhm. All right, now intensity in dieting is a real thing. And the thing about intensity is that it is a purely 100% you decision. You can be an angry little T-Rex with your fried food and hoarding it, and yeah, sure, that's intense and angry and all other stuff, but what it really comes down to is how strict are you with yourself and what you allow. Are you going to be someone who is making sure that you are calculating that every single week of fat loss you are gaining, or sorry, every single week of fat loss you are losing 1% of your body weight exactly, and then when you are in a bulk, you make sure that every week you gain 0.25% of your body weight exactly. Are you having every single calorie, every single meal, every single food pre-planned for the entire week and you do not deviate? Or are you going to be more if it fits your macros where you're just chilling? You're like, well, all right, today I've got 2,500 calories, 200 grams of protein, everything else is free form. My breakfast was X, Y, and Z, and that was 500 calories and 20 grams of protein. All right, I guess my next meal I have more protein, and you just do that, and you're just like, play it by the seat of your pants. And if that's more relaxing for you and that works and you can maintain your progress and the numbers you need like that, and it makes you happy, then guess what? That's right for you. If you require the rigidity of having every single calorie for the entire week planned out and you have it at your time, and that's what makes you happy and that's what keeps you adhering and you're good with it, then that's the intensity you're going for. If you need to ramp up for your own goals, then you do that. If you're prepping for a bodybuilding show, guess what? Your intensity at the beginning of it is not going to be equal to the intensity of the end of it. The end of that bodybuilding show diet, you are nothing but intensity.
Yeah, I literally can't say it again. I've literally said this every single time, every slide. It's all up to you. You got to feel what feels right. But in order to feel what feels right, you need to pull away all the things that feel bad first. I didn't know that I was sensitive to gluten until I stopped eating gluten because I thought that I just fart and shit diarrhea all the time because that's what I do. That's just normal, you know. I get the beer shits, liquor shits. That's just what I do. Um, but I didn't get it until I tried it. And in order to try it, you need to look at yourself and realize that maybe this is something I should try. I'm not telling everyone to be gluten free or everyone has gluten sensitivity, but it helped me out.
Yep. Yep. But you had to be intense about eliminating it for a period of time.
Yeah, I had to
And
look
guess
at
what?
myself. I had to
Yeah.
I had to realize even what gluten was.
Yep. Yep. But you were able to use that and you were able to adhere to that requirement until it started to cost less to adhere to that requirement. Because I'm sure right now it's a lot easier to avoid gluten for you than when you first started trying to
100%.
eliminate it. It takes
It
practice.
was
And
impossible not to eat bread. It hurt my body to not eat bread.
oh, yeah. And
But
then
now
you found
bread can
out,
go F itself.
yeah. Then you learned that it does hurt your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So now you have to be the one to answer what your diet should be, whether it is strict, whether it is just you eating what you want to do, or if it's you saying, I want a little bit of rigidity, so I'm just going to go for if it fits your macros. It's basically what is it that you are going to be able to do for an extended period of time that is a a way to better your life. That's it.
Yep.
It sounds simple, really, but it's one of those things that sounds simple, and then the actual execution of it, whole different story. The amount of learning to make that choice responsibly is a lot.
It takes time.
But that's where you got to crawl, walk, run. Figure out where you are. If you're in that crawl stage, then maybe your first step is to do nothing but write down what you eat.
I think that should be everyone's first step. Take a step back, look at what you're eating, and then step two, read the ingredients.
Yes, be aware of what you eat. It's a big part of it. So, here are a couple examples of you trying to formulate your diet. You have the bodybuilding, the cutting, the maintaining, and the bulking phases going into it, where you have that structuring your program on the whole. You have your on the go person where you try to food prep, but it's not always possible. So if you have to go ahead and eat out, then all right, cool. I'll just try to make a better choice when I eat out and have it be somewhat around what I would have food prepped if I could have food prepped. That's okay enough. Then you have the guy who just wings it. If you're experienced enough and you've had enough time where you know how your body responds to everything and you want to be free form to the point where you just know by the end of the day whether you had the correct amount or not and you're able to predict that as you eat throughout the day, more points to you. You have reached the epitome of intuitive eating that few people will ever be able to get to. If you could do that and progress in athletics and body composition, then you are one of the elite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do it blindly. You gotta take a look at it, or have somebody else look at it for you. And like we said before, it's so hard to track to begin with, let alone doing it without tracking. I think the most important thing is you pretty much can't become obese by eating only natural foods. It's pretty hard to eat enough peanuts to become obese. So I think generally, if you were to just hang out and eat foods that you knew how to pronounce the names of, if it's swim, grew, flu, eat it up. I think that you'll be on a good path, on the go or winging it, if you have one rule, and it's keep it natural.
It would definitely help. And you can kind of make an analogy to that with how I said every single diet is a method of calorie restriction. And the examples of keto and Atkins, where they just take away a food group in order to reduce your calories, there's some similarity to that concept. And saying, okay, if I just eliminate things that are really artificial and processed, well, guess what? You have eliminated so much of the readily available calories that you're basically doing a restrictive diet, but for your benefit instead of a restrictive diet that harms you.
Yeah, I think the only diets, let's say the word diet, I would suggest to anyone is elimination diet. Is to start eliminating things from your food and seeing how your body reacts with your current diet, right? Just adjustments. I don't think that uh, I don't think I could maintain one of the diets that we're talking about now. I don't think I could go fully keto or Atkins or paleo or carnivore for you know
There, there's one last thing that I'm going to touch on here, and you already hinted it with the way you just talked about it, where you're like, let's call it diets. A lot of what is going to determine whether it's healthy or not for you is how you frame it. And you'll notice one key thing that I've left for the very, very end, and that is my definition of the word diet. I said weight gain diet, fat loss diet, maintenance diet, maintenance phase. These things are all different terms, but you'll notice how I made them kind of universal. Phase, diet, it's the same thing. The definition of diet is not a weight loss diet. The definition of diet is just the foods that you eat.
100%.
So the diet is the noun, and then the goal is the adjective. The adjective describes the noun. Your fat loss diet, your muscle gain diet, your health phase diet.
Your shitty diet.
If for some
Yeah.
people, yes, yes. Maybe literally if they're really bad with the FODMAPs.
Yeah,
I
true.
don't know.
I know a
All
couple
right.
people.
Yeah. So keep in mind, you'll always have option four where you just do what works for you. And all of this is summarized by makes you happier. If you can sustain it and if it betters you, then it's a correct answer for you. Done.
Fantastic. Great work today. We went a little bit over. We got some good clips, I think, though.
Mhm.
We'll see you guys here next Thursday, same time, same
Yep.
place, same time. Sleep and recovery. Talk about some creatine, maybe some supplements, maybe a little bit of sleep.
Yep.
Maybe even peptides. We might even talk about peptides. Who even knows? We'll see what
Oh,
happens.
that's a whole can of worms.
You'll,
That's going to be interesting. So,
oh yeah. All right.
you want
Awesome.
some drama? We
Yeah.
can bring that in.
All right. Well, Alex, thank you for coming, and thank you everyone for joining. I'll talk to you next week.